Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to watch the show. Today we have a guest on, a very special guest. His name is Luis Perez, and he is an ex-rabbi who studied in yeshiva and everything like that. So Mr. Perez, can you give us a little information about your background? In yeshiva and everything like that. So Mr. Perez,
Wait, hold on one second.
a little information about your background in yeshiva and everything like that.
Wait, something's going on. Hold on.
Mr. Perez,
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Here, let's see if that works now. For some reason, I was getting feedback for some reason.
Okay.
I don't know. Did you hear that feedback? Let's see if it happens again. Hopefully that won't happen again. So if you could give us a little detail about your background, who you are, where you studied, how you got your information, your conversion to Judaism, and then how you left Judaism.
Sure. Yes. Thank you again for having me, Vincent. I appreciate that. I've seen you on Hannah and Steven's channel talking about the Noahide laws, and I've learned so much from your work and their work as well. So thank you. And yes, for the audience, my name is Luis Perez. I grew up Jewish. I was introduced to Judaism from my father and went through Reform Judaism, then moved into conservative Judaism, and then ultimately after undergraduate school, I got involved with Orthodox Judaism, and then eventually spent some time in Israel, did some studies there, and upon coming back to the States, I worked with my local rabbis here and was able to get ordination. And so there's several videos out there with a lot more detail, but that in a nutshell, that's the background there.
So can you tell us why did you come to leave Judaism?
Well, coming from a Christian perspective, of course, I don't know if your audience is what religious or non-religious perspective they may be coming from.
A lot of them are Christian.
Okay, so from a Christian perspective, I believe that God sent in my path people that are believers in Jesus Christ. And there was one person that initiated after meeting. I would call him an evangelist. He gave me the gospel from the New Testament initially, and then eventually there was one meeting that we had together, and he began to read from the prophet Jeremiah in chapter 31 and verse 31. And in that verse, it talks about God creating a new covenant that he didn't make with Israel and Judah prior, or like with their ancestors. And so when I heard new covenant, I had enough cultural awareness that it sounded like New Testament, but the person told me that no, it's not New Testament, it's Old Testament. And so we began to talk about it, and that person asked me, can you bring the Hebrew scriptures and compare the scriptures together? And sure enough, there in the Hebrew, there's the word Brit Chadasha in Hebrew. And if you say that anywhere in the modern day Israel, the state of Israel, you probably will not get the best liking or a hug or a kiss. So when I saw that phrase there, that really woke me up. And
what does that phrase mean?
It means New Testament, New Covenant, Brit Chadasha. So the most hated term in the state of Israel, probably, and especially in the most religious sectors, is looking at me straight from the text itself. And so that was the moment that I believe that in 1 Corinthians, it talks about how the Jews have a veil over their eyes. And I believe that that spiritual veil was removed at that moment, and that allowed me to go further into the New Testament and become saved according to Christian doctrine and belief.
Okay, so can you tell us, did you ever, when you were studying, did you learn about the Noahide laws?
Yes, but not to the extent that I'm studying now. It was presented to me as these are the laws that the rest of the nations have to follow because of their connection to Noah. I did study a little bit as to hearing from rabbis talking about a differentiation between the nations and Israel. But as I began to go deeper and deeper into the Talmudic text, I started seeing things that, wow, just amazed me. I was in shock as to the things I would read. And perhaps if you'd like, I have some stuff prepared that we can look at.
Yes, that sounds
good. Yes, and the short answer is yes, we studied it. But now that I'm even going back now as a Christian and looking back at the rabbinic literature, I'm in awe, complete awe.
Mm-hmm. So what did you learn? You had some things lined up.
Yeah, I think I can share my screen, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me pull up. Here we go. So I want to, no pun intended, but I want to go back to the beginning if possible. So let me share my screen here. Let's see. So, would like to record this computer screen. Let's see.
It should. Okay, there's a little button at the bottom that says share inside the.
Let's see. Am I sharing now?
No. Go to in the StreamYard, down towards the bottom, there should be a little button that says share.
Okay, so I clicked on there, clicking sharing, and it says Chrome has lost permission to capture your screen. Oh no.
Oh, is it a website you're trying to show?
No, just my screen. I'm clicking share screen. Let's see. Interesting.
Well, wait, hold on one second. Let me see something. Oh no. All right. Well, you can just, I guess, read to us.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I had something here, but I think it's something with my settings. So, but I'll just go through what I have here, and then if anybody wants, they can email me later, and I can send them the document. We want to go looking at the origins of rabbinic authority. So what we want to have in mind is that the current Judaism that people are aware of is not the religion of the Bible. And I saw that you made that point eloquently as well in your webpage. And that's the misconception that Christians have. They're thinking that these people with the curls and the hats and wearing the black and white, that is Judaism that goes back to the prophets or even Moses himself. And that's something that we need to break. That's a paradigm shift we have to make here. And so what we'll do is we'll look at the origins of rabbinic Judaism, not biblical Judaism. And so I make the argument that the way it was presented to me, that the origins of rabbinical Judaism is in a section of the Talmud called Bava Metzia, page 59b. And in essence, there's this rabbi named Eliezer, and he's trying to convince this group of other rabbis that Jewish law is voting in his favor of interpretation. And he does all these different miracles to make his point. But this group of rabbis are not convinced. And so eventually the voice of God, in the text, it's called the Bat Kol, the divine voice comes down from heaven and tells this group of rabbis, right? Why are you guys debating with this rabbi? We've already proven so many times that Jewish law is in his favor. And so this group of rabbis eventually say to the voice of God, right? They say the Torah is no longer in heaven. And so in essence, what they're teaching there is that because God gave those Pharisees, those rabbis, the Torah, that God can no longer tell them what to do with that gift, right? And so the story concludes with another rabbi named Nathan, Rabbi Natan, and he, in the story, encounters the prophet Elijah, and was asked of him, what did the Holy One, blessed be he, do at that time when these rabbis told God that the Torah is no longer in heaven? And so the response of Rabbi Natan in relation to what God responded was this. So in essence, God said to them, my children have triumphed over me. My children have triumphed over me. And so this is the foundational text of where the rabbis get their authority, and from henceforth how they adjudicate and make their rulings and opinions on whatever the topic may be. So now God is no longer the sole authority, but he is manifested, so to say, in these rabbis. So that, again, that section is Baba Metzia 59b. Now this is important because when the rabbis have established this authority, this is where you start getting into the beginnings of what they view of the nations and what the rulings will be in relation to Noahide laws. So rabbinic teaching supersedes scripture. So as a result of this authority, it's no longer just the Old Testament. It's no longer just the Torah and the prophets and the writings. Now it's the extension of the oral tradition. So in their belief, Moses went up to Sinai and not only just received the written biblical text, but he received the oral tradition as well. And so in Eruvin 21b, which is another section of the Talmud, right, the Pharisees teach, they're telling one of their disciples, my son, be careful to fulfill the words of the sages, even more than the words of the Torah. Whereas with respect to the words of the sages, anyone who transgresses the words of the sages is liable to receive the death penalty. So this is huge. It's not only that they told God off and said, hey, we don't have to listen to you now that we received the Torah. Now, in essence, they are the embodiment of God, right? They are the full authority. If you don't listen to them, you, in essence, get the death penalty, right? So Any questions so far?
No, you're doing a good job of explaining this.
Okay, and if you see any questions in the chat, let me know, because I can't see what you're seeing. But so now we've established authority, and now we've established that it's not just the biblical text, but it's their interpretation. And this is where you get now the embodiment of scripture called the Talmud, right? In Jewish rabbinic tradition. And so once you have that authority and you have that power over scripture, now they make a distinction between the nations. In Sanhedrin 59a, scripture is not for everyone. Okay, so in this section, a rabbi by the name of Yohanan says the following: a Gentile who engages in Torah study is liable to receive the death penalty. As it is stated, Moses commanded us a law and an inheritance of the congregation of Jacob, indicating it is an inheritance for us, i.e. the Jews, and not for them, the Gentiles. So notice the difference in the approach with Christianity and Judaism. In Christianity, Jesus wants the gospel to go out. He wants the message of the Bible to go out. Here in the Talmud, the obvious quotes that we see here is that Gentiles are now something different than the Jew. They're not able to have the Torah, the Bible itself, the Word of God, on pain of death. So now we just made a distinction there. They further carry it on into the section called Yevamot 63a. Okay, and in 63a, it's taught there, and I quote, even the families that live on the earth who have land of their own are blessed only due to the Jewish people. Even the ships from Gallia to Hispania are blessed only due to the Jewish people. So now this view of inferiority of the nations, the nations are only blessed as a result of the Jews. You need the Jews, right? This is their philosophy, their idea. And so the rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper. So as a result of this, we go into the actual section of what I believe is one of the first, if not the first, mention of the Noahide laws themselves, right? So the rabbi's gift to the nations is the joke, right? The 7 laws of Noah. In Sanhedrin 56a, it says the following. The sages taught, and notice how they start. The sages taught this. You're not going to find this in the Bible, in Genesis, or any other book. They started off, the sages taught. The descendants of Noah, i.e., all of humanity, were commanded to observe 7 mitzvot, or 7 commandments. The commandment of establishing courts of judgment, and the prohibition against blessing, cursing the name of God, and the prohibition of idol worship, and the prohibition against forbidden sexual relations, and the prohibition of bloodshed, and the prohibition of robbery, and the prohibition against eating a limb from a living animal. So see here now, because again, let's recap. From the beginning, the rabbis told God off and said, we are in charge. Therefore, they've established their authority. Their authority supersedes the written word of God. Therefore, as a result, they've made a distinction in their authority between Israel and the rest of the nations. The word of God does not apply to these nations, nor should they read it on pain of death. And here is the Noahide laws. And so this is the foundation of getting from the beginning of Rabbinic Judaism to the point where we're at, where we're discussing this concept called the Noahide laws. So hopefully I didn't go too fast and I did some justice there to give a summary for your audience.
Yes, no, that was very good. So yes, we were going through Dinim. I've been going through a lot of Dinim and making videos about that. And people don't understand that the Noahide laws are much more than just 7 laws. Those 7 laws are actually categories of many, many, many laws under it. And some of those laws mean that you have to respect the sages, you have to respect the Torah scholars, and even not doing that, as you said, you're liable for death. What kind of, now you weren't Chabad, right? You were not.
No. I was considered Sephardic and modern Orthodox. Sephardic means Spanish Jewry, and modern Orthodoxy would be it's Orthodoxy, but it's probably the farthest left of Orthodoxy possible before tipping over, if that makes any sense. But I did visit Chabad. I knew people of Chabad. We would frequent their synagogues. During the festivals, they have so many programs and things set up for families and for singles. I mean, they do an excellent job on Jewish outreach in that sense, with the goal of getting people, or Jewish people in particular, right, to become religious and to start learning about what we're talking about at a whole different level, and they give you the game plan for what their expectation is for these end times and how these laws will be implemented.
Now, the thing is, a lot of people try to tell us that this is just Chabad. Is there a lot of cross-pollination between Chabad and other schools on these Noahide laws and collaboration?
Yeah, let me explain that. So Chabad is, if there's a category called Orthodoxy, right? And so in Orthodoxy, on the farthest right, the right wing is called Hasidic Jewry. And so the Hasidics are those that they're considered very pious, religious. And so Chabad is part of that grouping of right-wing Orthodox Judaism. And so that's not like a separate religion or a separate movement. They are Orthodox Jews. They just happen to be of the more right-wing fringe of Judaism.
And I mean, but when it comes to these Noahide laws, they're leading the way. Chabad is leading the way, but the other sects are just kind of letting them do this, not interfering and even working with them to a certain degree.
Yes, because keep in mind, what I just read is the Talmud itself. So a real traditional Orthodox Jew that will talk to you one-on-one will have to say whether they accept what we just read or not personally, they have to accept it because as we know from the Talmud, if you break from the word of the sages, if it were to be implemented at any point, they themselves would be on pain of death to deny. So this is not just which movement within Orthodoxy. This is Orthodoxy in itself. Whatever I just read is the foundation of the religion. Now, conservative and Reform Jews, they will say, we don't believe in any of this stuff. Well, then we can debate if that's a viable Judaism or not. But the religion itself, it's although it's led probably by a lot of the Hasidic movements now, the Noahide laws and Chabad in particular, this is greater Orthodoxy. This is the religion itself. So even the most liberal Orthodox Jew, and when I mean liberal, they're not dressing like Chabad, right, with the curls and the hat. They wear a regular shirt like I'm wearing. They'll have the traditional. I don't mean liberal like politically. They're just more. They're more involved in everyday world. They go to work. They observe their commandments and their religion. So this would fall even to the most left wing, or I should say, Orthodox Jew, because this is the religion. It applies to them as well.
Okay, so they often try to make us feel as though if we become Noahides, a lot of this negativity that the Talmud has towards Gentiles, I mean, isn't there still, how would we be viewed even if we become Noahides? What would that be like? I mean, what degree of respect? And I'm asking that because I have seen Noahides and rabbis interacting where the Noahides and the rabbis are agreeing that Jews have 5 levels to their souls, while Gentiles only have 3 and are in an animalistic state and can only elevate themselves through learning from the Jews and stuff. I mean, even if you become a willing Noahide, isn't there still this kind of debasing inferiority complex going on?
Yes, because in the Talmud, in the traditional rabbinic literature, non-Jews are not considered human at all. They look like human beings. They have a nose, ears, eyes, but they're not considered in the most physical and especially in the spiritual sense, B'nai Adam, children of Adam. Okay. And so Maimonides, I'm going to quote right here. If you want to know what it's going to look like as an implementation, I urge you to read the section. You can go to this website, sepharia.com or .org. It's one of the two, .com or .org. It's a compendium of all the rabbinic literature, and it's translated into English, and you can see it side by side with the Hebrew or Aramaic. And so in Maimonides is a famous rabbi. Every Orthodox Jew, apart from the Shulchan Aruch, which is codified Jewish law, will look at Maimonides as one of the key representatives of rabbinic Judaism. And so he wrote a book basically called the Mishnah Torah, his commentary on everything about the Torah and the Bible itself. And so in a book that he wrote called Kings and Their Wars, in chapter 9, he says the following: a non-Jew who violates one of the 7 commandments is executed by means of the sword. So there's your answer, whether you're Noahide or, technically Noahide, or you declared it. you're always going to be a non-Jew. You're always going to be inferior. And even when you convert, I can assure you, they don't treat you the same. It's a second-class citizenry. I mean, ask anyone recently in Israel. That was one of the debates, right? The Supreme Court, the secular Supreme Court, decided to accept conversions from non-Orthodox movements. And so that should just tell you right there, they don't accept each other within each other, much less within Orthodoxy. So if that's the case amongst themselves, well, here's your answer from Maimonides again, right? A non-Jew who violates one of the 7 commandments is executed by means of the sword. In chapter 10 of the same book, Kings and the Wars, he says the following: a non-Jew who busied himself with the Torah is liable with his life. So again, even if you're a Noahide and you're studying Torah, you're still a non-Jew, and this is the consequence, right? If you're studying Torah and you're doing it on your own, no interpretation from the rabbis, you're liable to pay with your life. And he ends the quote this way: he must, meaning the Gentile, right, the non-Jew, he must involve himself in their 7 commandments only. So that is what Maimonides is saying about the Noahides. You're still a second, third class, who knows, maybe even 4th class citizen at that point. It doesn't raise your status. Your only job as a Noahide is to keep studying the 7 laws. And as you mentioned, the 7 laws are just the foundation. These things break up into multiple subcategories and rabbit holes that you never find the end of. And so hence the statement, the Gentile must involve himself in their 7 commandments only. This is, can you imagine it? I mean, if you went into the street and said something like this, most people would think, Hitler said this or somebody else, think of the most wicked person you can think of. And yet this is rabbinic Jewish text, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's your answer. Maimonides answers you completely. Noahide or not, you're still a non-Jew and your status doesn't rise. If anything, your consequence always is your life is at stake.
So someone named Steve had 2 questions in the chat. The first is that there's a break, Orthodoxy has this Noahide thing, but even liberals and Reform, don't they all have the same end time, eschatology? How do you say that word?
Eschatology, yeah, that's the fancy, theological.
So, I mean, in the end, they're all waiting for the Messiah, right?
Well, the answer technically is no. So let me give you a quick summary. It's for Steve, right? You said Steve? So Judaism is divided by 3 movements. You have Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. And so listen carefully on how I'm going to use my definite articles and articles, okay, in the following statement. Orthodox Jews believe that the Moses went up the Mount Sinai to collect the Torah and the oral Torah. So notice I said the, right? So they believe in a literal Moses, a literal Mount Sinai, a literal Torah, on the condition that he also received a literal oral tradition at that same time. Conservative Judaism, now listen to my articles again, right? They believe a Moses may have gone up a Mount Sinai to collect a Torah and maybe an oral Torah. So you see the digression there? And then Reform Judaism says this probably never happened, but because out of respect for the traditions of our fathers, we will honor it. And so the farther you get away from a literal understanding of the scripture and rabbinic literature in this case, then anything is possible. And so that's why conservative Jews and Reform Jews, they'll probably hear this discussion and be like, first of all, what are you talking about? And second, even if that's true, which it is, right? We have the text here. Unfortunately, I couldn't show it on the screen. They won't believe it because they don't even believe in the text or even God himself, right? And so if Orthodoxy is telling in the scripture, right, in their scripture, basically telling God we're in charge, well, there you go. You see the digression in conservative Reform. And so that's a summary of the 3 movements and why conservative or reform, may not fit this description. If anything, they're going to be probably victims of this situation as well, because Orthodox Jews don't recognize them to begin with. And Reform Judaism doesn't even believe in a Messiah. They believe in a messianic era, right? So they've done away completely with the God of the Bible, the rabbis themselves, and the concept of the Messiah. Conservative Jews, it'll vary. You have very traditional conservatives that are very close to Orthodoxy and believe in a literal Messiah. And then you have the other compendium that on the left, where it's closer to Reform, where they believe in this messianic age and not necessarily a person.
Well, what do you think? I've been doing this for a long time, and my experience has been that the Orthodox Jews are pushing this, but the conservative and the Reform Jews, they're not against it, and more importantly, they really don't want you being against it. I've met, I've met very few Jews, there's Public Law 102-14, which is an offensive and inaccurate statement by the government. And these types of laws, the way they are written, can be repealed for being inaccurate and offensive. And I have found that Reform and conservative Jews really don't want you talking about repealing that law. So, do you think that there's some collaboration?
Yes, behind the scenes, yes, because at the end of the day, their identity as Jews is a bloodline. It's biological. It doesn't necessarily have to do with faith, right? Even in Orthodox Judaism, you can have an atheist Jew, and the Orthodox Jew will accept them into prayer just because they were born Jewish. They can deny God, they can deny, everything about the religion, but because they were born Jewish, yes. So that camaraderie of we are Jews, we have a bloodline. Behind the scenes, if not in public, they're always going to support each other, whether they agree or disagree on theological issues. So yes, I would say, there is, for lack of a better word, a conspiracy in the sense that they're conspiring. Yes, that at the end of the day, I just believe that the conservative and Reform will be victims of their own people, in the sense that eventually, once they see that their Orthodox colleagues will take over and implement these things. And then from a Christian perspective, if you're looking at the book of Revelations, well, this parallels everything that I'm reading, in a way parallels what's being said in the expectation in those end times. But yes, ultimately, I think deep down they will be together because of that concept of they're the chosen people, and their chosenness has to do with them, not with faith like it's taught in the New Testament.
Right. Because as you've said, they're the new officials over this. So you don't necessarily, if they say that you're in because you were born into this, then you're in. And there does seem to be a club, and I'm very hesitant to let secular and Reform and liberal Jews off the line, because in my work I have found that they're not against the Noahide laws, and they really don't want you being against it. They don't want anyone being against it. They might not be out there promoting it, but once they come to learn about it and to understand it, they don't want you repealing Public Law 102-14. They don't want you talking about this. They don't want the Gentiles getting aggravated about this. They tell you, well, we really can't see what you're talking about. We really don't understand where this is coming from. Steve, what was the second question? Oh, Steve wanted to know if you believe that Judaism is an apartheid religion.
Yeah, from a Christian perspective, again, anything that rejects Jesus Christ, I would have to look at as a religion that is not one that I would accept and follow, of course, right? So that would include Judaism, right? Because if we go back to what I introduced at the beginning, the origins of Rabbinic Judaism is works is by man, right? So from my perspective as a Christian now, there's basically two faiths. There is salvation by grace through faith in Jesus Christ, right? Something Jesus did for you, not your own works. And then there's the religion of Satan, where man is basically a co-worker with God, and through his own works, man's works, that's how man will find righteousness before God. These are two polar opposite religious beliefs. So Judaism falls under that. Any religion that says me plus the work that I do would be the antithesis of Christianity. So I would put Judaism in that works-based religion, and I would consider it a false religion from a Christian perspective.
So I mean, but there's definitely apartheid built into the religion.
Can you define, or what does he mean by apartheid?
Steve, if you can define what you mean by apartheid, so he can answer the
question. Because I'm thinking South Africa, so I don't know if he means the same thing.
Well, apartheid is usually when there's legal separation between people and one is treated inferior.
Oh yeah, by that definition, I think we proved that from the text itself. Yeah, definitely, there is a separation. They not only a separation, the text itself concludes that anyone that is not Jewish, right, and not Jewish by lineage, by bloodline, right, or by conversion in theory, they are not Ben Adam. They're not sons of Adam. They're not human. That's huge. Can you imagine if you went in the street and say, because you're not American, you're not human? That's apartheid by definition. Then yeah, for sure. Under that term, I would say yes.
How could they say we're not from Adam if all humans are from Adam and Noah was from Adam?
No, and that's the kicker, because they have rabbis that contradict each other. There's some that say do, some that say no. But in this greater plan of the eschatology of their religion, the majority rule out, right? That's what those rabbis were saying in that first story that I told. The majority rule. And so the real view of the religion itself is that, this is why they always talk, we're the chosen people, right? You always hear, we're God's chosen people. The nations are not God's people, and they take it a step further because of their authority, right? That we established in that sequence of Talmudic readings, is that they're not humanity. So how can they say that? Because they can. It's literally that simple.
So, I mean, are they being illogical if they're saying we're not children of Adam? Is that what they're saying?
Precisely. They're saying so children of Adam in rabbinic theology means humanity, right? Even to this day in modern Hebrew, right? If you want to say human being, you say Bnei Adam. You say son of Adam.
So they're saying that we don't fall under that.
Precisely. That's what the text is teaching.
That's very odd, because I mean, Noah was obviously a son of Adam and we're all the children of Noah. So that would be a contradiction, wouldn't it?
Well, they have that debate. The disciples ask their rabbis, and they'll say, no, Noah was technically, although a believer in God, he was not considered Jewish. He was not considered Israel. Hence, Noahide, right? Hence, you, Vincent, are this extension of Noah, and these particular laws pertain to you. So it's weird. Again, it's a religion that if you start going down the rabbit holes, you start seeing the red flags. When their own leadership argues and debates about these things, much less any other topic, that should tell you you're in a cult or a false religion.
Okay, I have an interesting question for you, and it has to do with, have you been noticing or realizing this growing alliance between Islam and the Noahide movement?
I haven't precisely in my experience until now, doing research and reading what you have presented and what Yana and Steven have presented on Israeli News Live. I haven't experienced it, within my purview, but I believe that it's happening. Obviously, it's happening. We can see this Abrahamic Accords that were done in the past year. And this is all part of biblical prophecy and end times as well. So these things had to pass, and I'm assuming behind the scenes, the Noahide laws were part of this, and what this is going to implement is this this one world religion type of idea where let's put our differences aside and let's unite on what we do agree on, and the Noahide laws are going to be that bridge or that factor that unites everyone together. So I can see that happening. I can see it with other religions that appear to be monotheistic.
Because there is someone in the chat that I discuss with a lot. Her name is Claire Call, and she's not quite a Muslim. She has, I mean, she believes in the Quran and things like that. I'm not going to get into her distinct theology, but she says that she follows the school of Sharia. And she has been trying to get these rabbis to rank the world's religions in regards to how Noahide they are. So would you believe that Islam is more Noahide compliant than Christianity?
Yes, on the surface initially, because they claim to be monotheistic, they don't believe in a human being who's simultaneously divine, who simultaneously claims to be the Son of God, God Himself. So I would say Islam definitely would be one of the first qualifiers, and again, and that's why I believe all these political alliances are being made as a result, because this is part of that end time scenario where Noahide laws come into play. And so yeah, I think they would be the first ones I would go to if I were the rabbis, precisely because of proximity as well, being in Israel,
yes,
and being surrounded by Arab states. So those are the first allies I would want to get on my side for sure, if I was still there in that situation.
But isn't this just because what I've read is Maimonides said even if it's not idolatry, it's still forbidden to practice. You're not allowed to make your own new religion or new holidays or anything like that.
Well, yeah, remember, keep in mind the quote I just gave from Maimonides, right? The sole purpose of the Gentile is to only focus on those Noahide laws. So this is a facade, right? This is going to be the trickery. Oh, come in as you are. We'll accept you as Muslim as long as you give us our temple and you let us do what we want to do. Malarkey, it's farce. That's how they're going to lure people in. And then, because this is, if you read The Kings and Their Wars by Maimonides, it goes into those details, right? I'll just read it to you. It's right here in chapter 6, right? War is not conducted against anyone in the world until they are first offered peace and they refuse it. If they make peace and accept the 7 commandments incumbent upon the sons of Noah, none of them will be killed, but they must pay tribute. If they propose to accept upon themselves the payment of tribute, but not servitude, to us, which is, i.e., Israel, the false Israel, or they accept servitude but not tribute, we ignore their proposal until they accept both. So that's the plan. Initially, they're not going to care. You can pray to whatever you want in whatever language, but sooner or later, they're going to narrow it down, because you have 2 options. Even as a Noahide, you will pay tribute and you will serve as slaves. You will be subservient to this Israel that in the New Testament is called the synagogue of Satan, right? They say they are Jews, but they are not, right? And so this is the eschatology, the end time scenario. So Muslim, Christian, whatever religion you are that claims to be one religion, it's not good for you either way. I mean, if you lived long enough to go through this whole process, you don't come out on the end on top. The house never loses, like they say in Las Vegas, right?
How do you think that they got the Vatican on board? Because the Vatican also signed an official proclamation stating that the Noahide laws are incumbent upon humanity. But the Vatican, I mean, they're not dumb. They're religious scholars. They must know that there's a problem with the Trinity and Christianity being idolatry. So why would they sign on to this?
Well, again, my perspective is Christian, so everything is a spiritual battle, right? So at the end of it, it's the puppet master is Satan. So even if you look at the modern catechism of the Catholic Church, which is 3 times thicker than the Bible itself, when it comes to the Jews, they have a theology that I call grandfathered in, right? They say because the Jews have been given one form of revelation, which is through the Old Testament, they're grandfathered in. They don't need Christ. They don't need evangelization per se. It would be nice if we had them in the Catholic Church. It would be nice if they would convert, but theoretically, we don't have to push that. And that's a result of the Second Vatican Council in 1960, which was already, rebellion and revolution, depending on what type of Catholic you're talking to, in relation to previous views of Jews and Israel, right? And so how did they get them? It was all satanic. If you want to talk psychologically, well, perhaps through guilt, or through, World War II and the Holocaust and all of these things, I'm sure played a factor, but ultimately it's a spiritual thing. It's something that had to be fulfilled from a biblical perspective.
I just want to remind people in the chat that they can ask questions for Louis to answer. I was wondering, I've been thinking about this, that do you think that there's these Zionist Christians, and right now they're telling us not to talk about these Noahide laws, and they're not something we should be discussing, and it's anti-Semitism to discuss it. How do you think that they're going to react when they start seeing people converting to these Noahide laws? Are they going to, I see this almost turning into, there's dual covenant theology where it says the Jews don't need Christ to be saved. I'm wondering, are they going to say these Noahides are saved without Jesus? How are they going to deal when someone in their congregation becomes a Noahide? How do you see that panning out? If they reject that, wouldn't that upset the Jews and cause problems? And do you see them acquiescing to this?
I think they're going to embrace it the way they embrace any other sin that's accepted in these mega evangelical churches. I live here in Texas. I visited so many churches. You have people showing up that are committing adultery. They're living in fornication, and it's open and it's public. I've been to churches where I found out where the worship leader is living and sleeping with another worship leader, and they're not married. It's accepted. They welcome it. They don't address it. So if they don't address something that serious, Noahide laws, come on in. That's my personal belief. These lukewarm mega churches that are 501c3s, again, from the book of Revelation, these are those compromised churches. They're the ones that are going to work with the government to implement all of these things. And because they have been taught this C.I. Scofield theology that Israel, if you don't bless Israel, God won't bless you. This dispensationalist theology where God has a separate covenant for unbelieving Israel versus a covenant that he has for the church. They're completely engulfed by that false theology, and that's why they are where they are. And so again, if they accept horrible sins that no Christian church should be accepting, and there should be some discipline in that church, Noahide law will be nothing, because they'll say, they're going to look at it from the surface. Well, these laws are general. What's wrong with it? We're fulfilling it anyway. We're Noahide Christians. That's my opinion. I think that it's because it's already happening. I've seen it.
Yeah, that you can be a Christian and a Noahide, and that you already naturally keep them. So what's the big problem? But
exactly.
I think a lot of them
come as you are, right? The rabbis are going to say initially, come as you are. Just don't talk about Jesus, don't talk about Allah, don't talk about Muhammad or whatever your religion might be. And that's how it's going to start off. But eventually, if you don't toe the party line, Maimonides tells you exactly what's going to happen when their Messiah king comes to power.
How do you see the fight? Okay, so in Christianity, we see that there's a split coming where there's Christians that are against these Noahide laws, and then there's Christians that do you think that there's Christians that are actually pro-Noahide, or do you think that they're just neutral, or do you think that these people are actually adopting the Noahide laws positively.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this with, this is Luis Perez. I'm not going to speak for entire Christianity, but when we say Christians that would accept these laws, that would accept a future mark, that would accept the beast system, these, in my mind, from my perspective, these are not real Christians, right? We're saying Christians in quote. The real Christians are going to be underground, either metaphorically or literally. And so for me, my prediction, if I could say, is that the more mega and bigger the church, the more compromised and the more involved they're going to be in. And so again, these Christians that would accept them, in my mind, they were never saved to begin with. If they go along with the system, if they accept the beast and worship the beast, which will happen, right? Jesus tells us in the New Testament that these quote unquote so-called churches will be compromised. There will be a falling away, right? But we know as Christians from the inside that this warning is not, these are not really Christians. These are not people that would say, I believe in Jesus Christ, but simultaneously I'm going to accept the authority and the yoke of these unbelievers.
What do you think about Noahide law being the great apostasy that everyone has been waiting for? Like, I feel like in the past, Christians were tagging this on like the New Age, saying that the New Age was going to come in and that would be the great apostasy that the church has been waiting for. But I'm starting to believe that the great apostasy will be Noahide, where people will actually be leaving the church to become Noahides. What do you think about that?
Yes, I would say yes, because again, looking from a book of Revelation perspective, you know, everything culminates in Israel and everything culminates in Jesus Christ. So whether the person believes in Jesus Christ or not, they will be resurrected and judged, and those to eternal damnation and those that believe to heaven. So yeah, I mean, for me, everything culminates in that region if I'm taking the New Testament text seriously. And so yeah, all these people are gonna, there has to be that falling away, and Noahide laws, if it's not the entirety of the falling away, it's definitely an aspect of it. But I do see it being a big aspect, if not the whole thing, because everything's going to culminate in Israel with the rabbis and ultimately their Messiah, which for Christianity is the Antichrist.
Right.
I would agree with you that it's if it's not just the foundation, it's the entirety.
Yes, no, that's how I see it, because it's going to be deceptive, right? It's going to be something that's deceptive. It's going to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's going to look good. And you know, I think that a lot of Christians have already been warning for years, well, don't get involved in the New Age. I think that everyone probably sees that as a problem. But this is there's definitely, like, I believe there's a spiritual blindness to it. I think it's so obvious, but I think that there is a kind of, okay, how the President Bush and all these other people that signed these into law, President Bush actually listed out the Noahide laws: no idolatry, no blasphemy. And in America, which has freedom of religion, to come out and say no idolatry, no blasphemy, you know, that you're putting this on record, that you believe in this, and this is what you're signing, no matter whose religion it is, no matter who is saying it, in America, that would be politically suicidal, you know what I mean, to do that. But it just went through, and Congress, you know, they didn't even ask, what are these Noahide laws? What am I signing here? What am I talking about? I mean, how do you, besides the spiritual blindness, how do you see the logic of these things being signed into law?
Well, you first have to know that they were signed into law. And so that's 99% of the problem.
No, but these politicians must have known what they were doing.
Well, I just recently saw an interview with Yana. I think she was interviewing Dr. Day, who her late husband was a congressman. He had no idea, and when she had told him about these Noahide laws, he went back to research, and apparently, from what I understood in the video, that Dr. Day's husband, who was the congressman, found out that it was done, or at least one of these versions of the passing of these laws that you're talking about was done overnight by 4 congressmen in behind the scenes in the dark. And so it's nefarious. These things are happening behind the scenes. So it's most of the time, you know, they're literally ignorant. I mean, look at the recent, you know, legislation that they tried to pass, you know, 800 and something pages. You're going to tell me every congressman sat there and read every page? And unfortunately, you would hope, right, that they read every page in detail and understood the words, right, because it's written in such legal jargon that even if you could read it all the way through, who knows if we would understand it. And so if that's happening on just an everyday secular level, well, even more so, you add the idea, the Talmudic idea that you can deceive the Gentiles. There you go. I mean, so the recipe is perfect.
Actually, is that kol nidra? I mean, that really is deception, right? It's a license for deception.
They're not going to say that, but I'll tell you, yeah, that's what we discussed. Because the whole prayer, right, kol nidre, right? You say this at Yom Kippur, at the festival of atonement, and you're basically not only asking for forgiveness and annulment of the sins you did, but those that you will do in the future. I mean, if that's not satanic and it's rude, I don't know what is.
Right. I'm just going to ask people to put in any last questions. Let me think what I was going to ask you something. Okay. I talk to different people. I have the petition online to have the Noahide laws repealed in America, and then I got to do one for the UN and the Vatican and stuff like that. Well, my first question is, do you see that being successful, or do you see the power structure that be coming out in support? Like, once this is known what they've signed and what they're talking about and everyone's out there, do you think that they're going to acquiesce, or do you think they're going to toe the line?
I commend what you're doing. I appreciate the petitions, and I'm with you. But again, and it's not to sound negative, but all these things have to come to pass. And the only time we have success is when Jesus Christ returns. And that's the Christian perspective. It's not, I don't want to offend anyone that's listening that's not Christian, but that's the position that I hold. So all this has to come to pass. So even if you do that, and I'm saying, please still do it. There's still got to be good people that do good things, right? But at the end of this has to go all the way through. Eventually, there's going to be, if it's not already implemented, there's going to be the New World Order. There's going to be a world religion, world government, world currency, and everything's going to culminate in Israel, not in California, not in Texas, not in India or China or anywhere else. Everything's going to culminate there. And eventually this entity, this Antichrist, whether it's human or demonic or some combination of both, this biblical book is going to come to pass. It's already coming to pass. Every day I go down my checklist of Revelation and seeing what things are occurring. And so, yes, again, I commend you, keep doing it. But unfortunately, these things have to come to pass. So no matter how many petitions, I firmly believe that they will not bend. They will not stop until they have their new world order. And it's already started. It started especially last year. This is what we're seeing with everything that's going on with COVID. And look at Israel, look at England, look at all these countries that are in lockdown. I mean, the only reason why I believe it hasn't come as strong here in the States is because people still have guns. The government knows that somebody will fight back, but eventually those people will die out, and they're going to win temporarily from a Christian point of view. But Christ has already won. We just got to live out these times.
So my last question for you is going to be, in their literature, I have read that eventually the Jews are expecting these Noahide laws to become a big controversy and to cause problems. So when we get to that point where everyone's talking about this and it's a big issue, what do you think? Right now, their response has been silence. Okay. I think the next thing is going to be that anti-Noahidism is anti-Semitism. But how do you think they're going to keep it going when this becomes a topic that divides everyone?
I mean, it's going to be speculation. I can only give what I think would happen, and again, we're assuming that there's going to be this massive division. I think the majority of people will not even know what's coming, and everything that is happening in the last year is signs that people are asleep, and that's what they're banking on. If there's going to be any controversy, it's going to be between people like ourselves and them, the ones that are awake and know and have the text and can show you the text, right? Even when they say, no, that doesn't say that. Really? Come on, come over to us. I would love for you to on screen read this with me and try to wiggle yourself out of this. That's where I think the division is going to be. But I again, because I'm coming from a Christian perspective, I think the majority of the world is not going to give a confrontation. They're gonna go hook, line, and sinker, because that's what has to be fulfilled. So again, I'm not trying to give you the contrary. I'm with you in spirit and in mind on this issue and what we should be doing, because we're good people and these are good things that we should be doing. But again, temporarily, we don't win, at least, and from my perspective, until Christ returns.
There was just one more thing. Somebody was asking if you have a website.
Unfortunately, I don't. I've been trying to figure all that out and working it. It's been very, very time consuming. But I do have an email that I have. And maybe you can put a link later in the video when it posts. But my email is Red Pill Israel. Again, Red Pill Israel at protonmail.com.
Okay, Red Pill Israel at protonmail.com.
Correct. Red Pill Israel at protonmail.com. And I've gotten so many emails from literally people all over the world. I've had great conversations. There was one woman from Ireland that was so nice, and we had great conversations. Another person here in the U.S. and just wonderful correspondence and good responses. So thank you to all of those people out there, if you're listening or hearing. And I welcome all your emails, and I'll do my best to get every question answered. I have been able to do it so far. So so if you don't get an answer right away, just be patient, and I'll definitely get to your email.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. You really gave us a lot of information, and I really appreciate anything that is done in this cause.
No, thank you again for having me, for your audience, for listening. Again, unfortunately, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened with my computer here. I guess the settings didn't allow me to share the screen. But again, you have that email there. If you want the text of anything that I was reading today, I have it all nice and set up. I can definitely email that to you. Just send me an initial email requesting that, and I'll just send that to you as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for everyone in the chats for coming, and I want everyone to have a good night. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, bye.